Hey VC, this is Harvey and welcome to the latest video upload for Spinning the Black Circle. First of all, cheers. Today's tipple of choice is Longhorn IPA, which is by a West Midlands brewery named Purity. Discovered these guys at a music festival in the West Midlands about 5 years ago, which is called the Mostly Jazz Festival. It's actually more of a soul and funk festival than it is a jazz festival. But if you live anywhere near the West Midlands in the UK, check out the annual Moseley Jazz Festival. And these guys Purity tend to have a tent there every year where you can sup beer in the sun. So back to the cold of February. Now today's topic is how to buy classic era Prince. So I'm talking about 1980s Prince. And it's the first of a series of videos I'm going to do that focuses on a particular artist. So why Prince then? Why start off with Prince? I do think that Prince was a genius. I think that phrase is used too often, but I think this chap was essentially a one-man band in terms of his ability as a multi-instrumentalist, and I think still an underrated guitarist, as a singer, a songwriter, someone who was prolific and could on their own craft whole bodies of work. And I think it's someone who will be listened to by generations to come. But like any artist whose work spans a number of decades, there are peaks and troughs to buying Prince. This is someone who operated from the late 70s through to his untimely death in 2016. So it's not linear in terms of buying Prince albums and expecting all of that output to be sensational. I think he experimented a lot. I think in his latter career, unfortunately, there were periods in which he stagnated, and a lot of the late 90s, early 90s output was, pretty kind of standard funk, with most of the albums sounding like the last one. I think he was starting to pull back into something more interesting towards the end of his, just before his untimely death. I saw him in, actually less than a year before he died in Birmingham in the UK with the band he was using at the time, Third Eye Girl. So the three female musicians. He was sensational. No signs at all that he was ill or any discomfort. So yeah, real shame that he died when he did. Obviously very young. What we do have left behind is an incredible body of work, particularly this classic 80s period. So we're going to skip his first two LPs, which were Prince and For You, and focus on classic 80s Prince albums and how to buy them. So the first two Prince LPs were released in the late 70s. His debut LP For You and follow-up Prince. Those LPs show promise, and we can't take away from the fact that he has a guy playing every instrument on an LP on a major label, but they kind of feel like almost a fairly obvious kind of soul funk stew. Nothing stands out as exceptional for me on those first two LPs. You've got some significant tracks on there. You've got I Feel For You was on the debut LP, which is later covered by Shaka Khan, and his first hit of any description in the US, I think it was US Top 30 on his self-titled LP, was I Want To Be Your Lover. So I'm not dismissing those first two Prince albums, but where his personality really did come to the fore and his abilities was on this LP, which is Dirty Mind from 1980. This is where we get him really pushing the boundaries in terms of this kind of androgynous approach, both in terms of the lyrical content and his look. Really risky lyrics on titles like Head and Sister on here, and Party Up. But more than anything, his personality just comes to the fore on Dirty Mind. It's a very guitar orientated album, quite a stark and bare production, with guitars to the fore. I think this is a sensational LP on vinyl. I think the key track for me is When You Were Mine. I don't know why that wasn't a major hit, because that's a sensational pop tune, but it's a great package. Dirty Mind on vinyl. I'd encourage you to get one of the early pressings. I haven't listened to a reissue, but you can pick this up for a few pounds or a few dollars. And I think this is where Prince became Prince in terms of that latent talent coming to the fore. So I'm going to skip over the follow-up to Dirty Mind, which was the LP Controversy. Not because it's a bad album, but it's kind of a continuation of the Dirty Mind sound, both in concept and feel. so nothing startlingly new. I think the next essential 1980s Prince LP is undoubtedly the follow-up to Controversy, which is released in 1982, and that is 1999. This is a brave LP to release. A few albums into your career, to release a double LP of essentially, long dance jams, and have the confidence to do that. It's incredible. It's easy in hindsight to say, look, this contains 1999 and Little Red Corvette and tracks like Automatic, obvious hits. But, who could have known that at the time? It's a really risky LP, and it stands up actually as, I don't think anything else sounds like it. It sounds like a 1980s LP, but it almost harnesses kind of a sense of that 70s P-Funk jamming aligned to this 80s sound, 80s Prince sound that he created. So a sensational album. This is a double reissue from a few years ago. I did have an original copy which sounds very similar to this, and so it's a normal price for a brand new copy of this would be circa £20 or $29, something like that. But Prince's 1999, I think, essential if you're buying classic 80s Prince. And the next is probably the most ubiquitous of these, and something that most people have in their collection. So I'm not going to talk about it for too long. That's Purple Rain. This is a reissue from a few years ago. I think what's interesting about Purple Rain is I think rightly the credit that the Revolution as Prince's band received for their part in this. So the key members being Wendy Melvoin and Lisa Coleman. So I agree with that. I think that it sounds like a band, but let's not forget that the core of this band is the work of Prince. All but one of the tracks are written by Prince on his own. Computer Blues is co-written with Wendy and Lisa. But I won't talk too much about this. It is an essential 80s LP, and it's since been reissued actually and remastered with a deluxe version on CD. Following his untimely death. So definitely ubiquitous. Purple Rain, Prince and the Revolution. And the follow-up to Purple Rain, I talked earlier about Prince's endless search for the new and his eclectic approach, and that's definitely evident on Around the World in a Day. So whereas the record company were probably calling for something that is a repeat or similar to Purple Rain, this is very much a left turn. It's Beatles influenced. Again, it sounds like a band with a revolution, but it's definitely Prince saying, look, I'm not going to be what you tell me to be, and I'll go my own way. And I think it probably commercially suffered because of that. It's got lengthy piano ballads like The Ladder on it, and the title track is a cornucopia of percussion. So quite a challenging follow-up to his biggest album ever. But listen to in isolation, this is an essential 80s Prince album. It's got that sense of him and the revolution really stretching out, and obviously it's got that incredible single Raspberry Berets on here, which was a big hit off this LP, but suffered commercially. But in terms of a 1980s Prince LP from that classic era, I still think this is very necessary. This is, I think, quite an early pressing, UK pressing. Sounds very nice, and I don't think this has been. It certainly hasn't been remastered. I don't think it's been reissued either. But you can pick up a copy of this for less than £10 in the UK. So Around the World in a Day, definitely in your collection. So I think the next classic Prince must-have from this era is his second soundtrack album. So the first of those soundtrack albums obviously being Purple Rain. And this is the soundtrack to the in my opinion, awful Prince movie Under the Cherry Moon. But the soundtrack is anything but. This is a classic Prince album, and it's called Parade. It's the last Prince LP to feature the Revolution, and it's just sensational. Again, he's stretching out and doing exactly what he wants to do. You've got steel drums on I Wonder You. You've got orchestral piano ballads finishing the LP, which is Sometimes It Snows in April. And obviously the massive US #1 hit Kiss is on this LP too. And I think this is Prince at his most confident in every way, shape and form, and it's an essential Prince album. It's also very beautifully packaged. If you get an early copy, this is a UK copy, but you've got the Paisley Park label coming into it, and let me handle this carefully with kind of the white side of the Paisley Park label. Sorry about the glare on side A, and then a kind of black and red lettering on side B. So I think the thing to do is get an early pressing of Parade. Sounds sensational. I don't think again that it's been reissued or certainly not remastered, but Parade, essential Prince album. So what happened next then? So the Revolution went no more. Prince disbanded the Revolution, but then followed it up with probably the single greatest statement of his career in my view, which is the Sign of the Times double album. So I'm not going to cover this in any detail because it's you can find it in one of my earlier videos, which is the 20 essential albums to start any collection. But this, for me, across the hundreds of albums I own and that I've heard, in terms of a single artist recording an album without any assistance, this is probably the greatest I've heard. It's essential to any collection, and definitely should be in your 80s Prince collection. So the next LP I think is quite underrated. It's the soundtrack album to the 1989 movie Batman, starring Michael Keaton. This LP is a lot more reflective than you'd expect, actually, in terms of what Prince is saying lyrically. There's the themes running through this in terms of loneliness and the personal conflicts that Prince was going through at the time. There's a lot more substance to the Batman soundtrack than I think it's given credit for. Tracks like The Electric Chair, Arms of Orion, Vicky Waiting, and Scandalous and Lemon Crush. I think that the big hit from this Bat Dance leaves a lot to be desired. But in terms of an album and its kind of closing album of the 80s, and I think Batman should be on that list and is an underrated Prince album. So here's the thing about collecting 80s Prince on vinyl. There was such an outpouring of material from Prince that he couldn't contain it in his work with Prince and the Revolution or his solo work. So I'm gonna show you 4 LPs that I think are important to have in your collection, despite the fact that the name Prince doesn't appear on the album cover. And the first 2 of those are by Sheila Ree. The first being The Glamorous Life, and the second being Romance 1600. I mean, this is essentially Prince in all but name. He wrote and recorded and played most of the instruments on these albums, and it's classic Prince, especially The Glamorous Life. That is an essential Prince album that just happens to have Sheila Ree singing on it. So those 2 LPs, add that to your 80s collection, in my opinion. The next LP, this lady did have. This isn't all about Prince. Jill Jones, the debut Jill Jones album, does feature her own material, and it isn't essentially just a Prince LP, but it's on Paisley Park Records, and he certainly writes some of the material. Mia Booker was the big hit from this. It's an excellent album and surprisingly easy to get hold of, given that it wasn't anything like a big hit. It was released in 1987 on Paisley Park Records, and I managed to pick up a really clean VG Plus copy of this for just a few pounds in the UK. So Jill Jones should be part of your 1980s classic Prince album collection. So final recommendation then, it's a bit of a cheat because this LP wasn't released in the 1980s. It doesn't feature Prince's name anywhere on the cover. In fact, Prince didn't contribute to this LP in any way, shape or form. But in terms of something that's sprinkled with Prince and the Revolution magic, then the 1990 LP by Wendy and Lisa, which is called Eroica, in my view is essential to this collection. It's probably the best LP that I've heard from this duo, and it reflects the freedom that they had, having disbanded from the Revolution and really struck out on their own. And it's very much a band effort in terms of how they approach it. So final recommendation for a classic Prince collection from that era is Eroica by Wendy and Lisa. So that's it. Do you agree? Disagree? Do you think there's another era in Prince's output that eclipses the supposed classic era. Please like, comment. I'd love to hear your views. Back soon for another update. In the meantime, have a great rest of weekend and bye.